Hi there. Welcome. I'm Bob Thompson, and I'd like to welcome you to the World of College Cost Challenges. Another one of those, oh no, college costs. I can hide from that. I can go and jump in the closet. I know college costs are up there. But we've been doing this for a number of years, talking about the cost of attending the college. A little bit of history as part of the reason that we produce this program is that way back when, my wife and I had 5 in college at one time. The group that I ski with in the spring, used to ski with in the spring, 31 children. And at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning in Utah, Harold, the accountant, says, how do we educate these kids with after-tax dollars? And all of our group were making pretty decent money. So this kind of kicked it off, and a little bit of history. In 81 and 82, several of us in that group, including Harold and myself, went to DC. We testified. We got in the congressional record. We recommended at that time as a model the Tuition Future program that was in Michigan in the mid to late 70s, which is now, we've morphed finally after 19 years of lobbying to get the 529 plan, which is the major vehicle for funding for college costs. But anything that you read and hear, and a lot of the political candidates today will talk about student debt. We are now over $1.5 trillion of student loan debt. Some of that is in arrears and behind payment and so on, default. But I was just saying to Patrick here that it wasn't 10 years ago that student loan debt was 800 and some million. Now we're at 1.5 trillion. So at my old age of 96, I'm a little bit outspoken about some of the problems that we have. And we've just compiled a lot of information that we've gathered, some empirical data that we've accumulated. And we're in the process of coming out with a book called The World of College Cost Challenges. I share some of that background with you because it's a problem today. It has been a problem, and we do not address the issues that we think are out there. And what we've been suggesting industry-wide, whether it's mutual funds, insurance companies, providers of 529, people out there counseling and so on. In my mind, we're missing the boat. So that's part of the reason for the book. We thought these programs we'd take a look at galley proof and the chapters, and maybe each of the programs talk about one or two of the chapters, or looking at parents. And I might add that probably 70 or 80% of the book content is contributions of parents, who I call veteran parents, who have experienced this process, some good, some bad. We have a longtime client down on the shore who comes back to me every once in a while and saying, you're right, it was a humbling experience. And other parents that share, we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. So the bottom line is the reason that we produce this program is to put out there some meaningful dialogue that we can share with each other, which, by the way, most parents, young parents, rely on just a few things and tend to do it yourself, which is fine. We have a lot of bright young people starting their families and wanting to adequately fund for their children's education. But we have a lot more parents out there that are struggling with their own student debt, let alone funding for their own children, their young children. So I appreciate you tuning in. And as we go through this, I hope it's meaningful. If you get anything, just a piece of something that will benefit you, then it's worth the time and effort to do this program. I struggle with the title of the programs all the time. Last program we talked about, it was validation. And the validation really was looking at an old article, newspaper article, looking at a program that we did 10, 12, 15 years ago. And what we were saying, then validated that we have a problem. We need to address this problem. And it's not by giving free tuition to everybody. I don't think that's a solution realistically. But there are strategies that we can implement. There are vehicles that we can concentrate on. And I didn't intend to include this in this program, but while we're on products and vehicles, product is not the answer. Where you put and save your money is not the primary issue. It's certainly important, but in a priority of 1 to 10, I would say product is not the answer. I'll give you a quick illustration of that. We probably have utilized with clients and parents probably 25 or 30 different vehicles, strategies, and so on. One gentleman that I just visited a couple of days ago, a doctor out in Missouri, part of our ski group. And the accountant got together with Doc and I and said, Doc, you got 3 kids. Let's buy a farm. Let's raise some cattle. Let's sell a bull, a heifer, a calf when we want it for tuition purposes. Literally, he educated his 3 children, and that was a major part of the financing for the colleges, for 2 daughters and a son. If we talked about another gentleman that bought a property that used for housing, off-campus housing, purchased that. 2 of his children went to the same school. Each of the children, daughter and son, were managers of the property, and it housed 6, 5 plus the manager child. And when the son graduated from college, the gentleman sold the property. Made a little bit of money, but the process was designed to have the rent pay for the mortgage and the excess cash help pay for the tuition and college cost of the child. We have a number of examples of that and how the product is in and of itself not the answer, but it encompasses a lot of dimensions that we talk about. The bottom line of the book in itself is that the advice out there for the last several decades, in fact, we could go back to the GI Bill after World War II and pull out a LIMRA College Board book and talk about calculators and so on. And if you've looked at us recently, you know that calculators are good, but they do more harm than good, in my opinion. But the point is, it is one of not just saving early and save a lot. That's the 2-dimensional approach that we've used for, like I say, decades. Save early and save a lot. So young couple sits back and says, whoa, we can't really save a lot, and we're really not able to save early. We've got these challenges. So when we started off, we were talking about a few challenges. But because of the contributions of a lot of families, a lot of parents, illustrating that this is where we were and this was a challenge. Here's what happened and this was a challenge. We went from 2 incomes to 1 income, a challenge. I lost my job, a challenge. We couldn't afford diapers and daycare, challenges. So we have just taken all of these challenges and we put it in what we call the world of college cost challenges. Now, let me come back to our title. Our title in today's program is Identifying Patterns. One of our chapters, and we refer to this particular chapter throughout the book, and we've identified all parents of children that will actually go to college. We're not talking about looking back and saying, well, we've got people in our data of our son or daughter went in the military, or didn't go to school, or did this. We're talking about parents sharing their experiences for a child or children going to a 4-year college. So when we identify patterns of these parents, we identified because of the input and categorized these parents into 3 different categories, okay? One is those parents, and this is looking back to 18 years before and following through that period of 18 or 20 years. That group, that first group, no plan. Their plan by default was to have no plan, okay? I make the analogy of my will is I don't have a will. By default, I don't have a will, but I have the state's will. Oh, yeah, you did tell me that. But over here, I have no plan, all right? And that group, and this hasn't changed. This has not changed in the last 20, 25, 30 years. That group of basic no plan at all is about 22, 24% of the universe of parents that we're talking about. The next group is kind of an informal plan, and it's the largest group. And this also has not changed over the years. This group comprised of 72 to 74% of the total number of parents. Informal group. And I'll come back to that. But the remaining group, the smallest group, is about 4%, less than 5, about 4% of those parents who have shared with us that they did certain things right, maybe by accident, but they did certain things that helped them go through this experience where at the end, we had some parents that say, Bob, we actually came out of this with a smile. So I put that smiley on there and say, these are the examples that we want to share with other parents, okay? So if I can, without tripping and without killing myself, let me just talk about these 3 groups. And I'm gonna get a pen that probably doesn't work. That's cute. A little bit better. I hope the red comes through. So we have this no plan, an informal plan, and a formal, what we call a formalized plan. We also call this, the people over here, they followed kind of a Form Ed plan. And what we're saying here is all parents that we have talked to over the years, seminars, I mentioned a couple programs that one year we had 82 seminars, and 50 or 60 of those were with Vermont National Bank because we got involved in helping them with the second college indexed CD. And Vermont National Bank with the different branches and people in the communities all over the state of Vermont. But we did a lot of seminars, and we've done seminars in a number of different states. But the point that I'm making is this group is about 22%, and over here 72 to 74%, and the magic 4% club over here. Now, the title of this program is really identifying patterns. And any statistical study, we talk about correlation between two different entities, events, or what have you. And what we're really talking about is with these two that we're trying to focus in on is we've got the y-axis here, and as we go up the y-axis, it increases the variables that we have, and the x-axis over here, as we increase those variables on the x-axis, that gives us some perspective on how this group, this variable, correlates with these variables on the x-axis. Now, identifying patterns, we want to connect the dots. And if we had a scattered plot, we'd find with all of these parents have the same dots. They have the same challenges. They have, everything is the same. It's like they're all twins, okay? The point as we go through talking about these families is that basically we're all the same. We have these challenges, but then we get into the differences. And those are the challenges. Income. I make household income is $400,000. I'm concerned about college education. Yes, even though $400,000 sounds, they should have no problem at all. But when we get a couple, he or she just getting out of the military, they're used to regimentation, they're used to a discipline of thrift, and they have a better chance of being successful through this process than the $400,000 couple. Kind of ironic, but we'll explain why. But the point here with the dots, and remember, we all have the same dots. And with each one of those dots is a challenge, a separate, distinct challenge. Now, this group of the no plan, you'll see this cluster of dots and challenges down here. Over here, we've got different dots, and the variable is that even though I'm in this informal group here, I can be over here, but as I move with the variable on the x-axis, I'm tending up. I'm having more success here for whatever reason. And identifying the pattern is the whole idea of this process. So I get questions every once in a while that say, how did you identify these three family groupings? Well, we gave them fictitious names. And this group over here, no plan at all, we have as Steve and Sandy struggles. Now, this group, Steve and Sandy struggles, they're down here and they've had all these challenges, but basically the big thing is they have no plan at all. Their plan is have no plan. That's default. While here we've got Gordy and Gail, and we say that some of these dots here is they started saving and they put aside $300 at a birthday, or they got a tax refund and they put $500 into a college plan. Or, you know, it's just that we kind of fly by the seat of our pants, and And as we think about it, and that's not all the time, but gee, our neighbor, Timmy across the street, can you believe Timmy is going to college this fall? And now I start to think about it. So I may go along this variable here on the x-axis and say, I really am doing better, but I'm still falling short. And it's not until we look at the dots over here. Now remember, everybody has the same number of dots, the same challenges. When we start off, it's not the income level, it's the degree of awareness of, I'm cognizant of the issue that someday we're hoping, the goal, we're hoping that our child goes to college. May not. That's a variable. We don't have a crystal ball here. But at some point in time, we've got this realization, this goal. Oh, by the way, Timmy has a younger sister. And Jordan, now we're talking about 2 children, and we have a 2-year overlap. Now here's another challenge. We're going to have 2 in college at one time, not 5 like I did. But here is an added challenge. So I may be over here on the x-axis, but then my family grows and I've kind of come back a couple steps. So again, saving early, save a lot, just isn't good advice out there, isn't substantial enough to address the overall problem. Now, what's this crazy group over here? 4% club, I call it. What do they have? Now remember, we take parents, and in this example, Steve and Sandy struggles are exactly the same. Exactly. They go to the same grocery store, they buy the same cans, they buy the same car, they have the same house. They are identical. Okay? Steve and Sandy are identical to Gordy and Gail. And over here, we've got Patrick and Paula. And somehow, Patrick and Paula Planwells did something. There's some characteristic, there's some dot that we need to identify. And what we've come up with after identifying the patterns here is that the primary thing over here, and this is common sense, but it's not until we go through the process that I become more aware that this dot is habit. Common sense, right? Intuitive. Why didn't Steve and Sandy exactly the same? They are they're clones, okay? Why didn't Steve and Sandy or Gordy and Gail identify on their own do-it-yourself kind of thing that this dot that they have, but never capitalized on it, because this dot here of habit is the same dot here and here, okay? So we think identifying patterns, and everything starts and ends in this process when you're talking about money with emotion. And emotion drives people, but emotion and money don't mix. So how do we put that common nature thing that all of us have, how do we put that together and harness it so that I become a member of the 4% over here, okay? Now I've got just a couple minutes here. I want to throw out one of the bigger challenges here, that most of the struggles and the well-intends, Gordy and Gail well-intends and Steve and Sandy struggles, get caught up. And I mentioned calculators. That's one of the things that does damage, and we'll talk more about that in future program. But one of the dangers that we need to address As we come along the y-axis here, and we want to come on the y from the x, we want to come on the y so that we are getting closer and closer to this 4. And that is back here, there's a contagious disease that we have that somehow we're going to qualify for financial aid. We just came out, and this is just yesterday, we just came out with our 36th annual survey, college survey. And I've talked about this before. 36 years we've been doing this. And for 25 years, we increased the projection of college costs by 6%. There are 2 articles this week, one in the Wall Street Journal, and I believe I read a similar article in USA Today in Florida a couple weeks ago, that there is a reduction, a trend, a reduced increases in cost of college. Now, that sounds good, but I don't buy part of that. What we've done in the last 5 years is reduce that 6% projection to 3%, but it's still over inflation. Colleges still have these subsidized loans that come in the front door, and we have, here's an interesting thing for you. We have 78 colleges and universities this year, 2019 and 20, charging more than $70,000 a year. Now, most of these schools will say 78% of our students receive some form of aid. Now, the day of grants that I don't have to pay back, scholarships that I don't have to pay back, are a smaller part of the financial aid package. And we're enamored, we're wired to think that we're going to qualify for financial aid. Surely with our income, we're going to qualify for financial aid. The problem is most financial aid is in the form of loans. So are we getting ahead by this hope, this dream, this assumption that we're going to somehow qualify for financial aid? So we get in, and one of our dimensions, and this whole thing is, instead of saving early and save a lot, is a 7-dimension program. And the 7 dimensions have been primary in this 4% club over here. Again, they're all the same. How do we get to this point, even though we're similar in all respects with these 2 over here? So identifying patterns, it's crazy when you're talking about hundreds and thousands of parents, and we're all faced with the same thing, even though geographically, if my child is, I live in eastern Texas, and my daughter is interested in going to school in Mississippi. Well, the schools in Mississippi, generally speaking, do not compare with the 78 most expensive schools that I made reference to, 70,000. So I can go to a good school in some states and get a good education, and maybe the cost is $23,000 a year. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the dynamics or the characteristics that were involved here. It's somehow, am I prepared? Am I prepared in this process? And we think with the 7 dimensions, we're better prepared because we have a track record, we have a guideline, we have direction for parents to follow and periodically review, tweak, and update their plan, and get out here so that someday they will look back and have a smiley and say, we had a degree of success. So that's a quick overview of identifying patterns and where the dots are. And hopefully I can relate that we all have the same number of dots. And how do we get through this a little more favorably financially and efficiently than if I were bogged down over here and never changed, never moved. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.